Now I'd like to reintroduce you to our presenter for today's program, Edie Elkan, who was just here with us in mid-December for part one of this series. In 2002, lifelong musician Edie Elkan founded Bedside Harp, a hospital-hosted educational and service company dedicated to promoting the therapeutic use of the harp in healthcare. Edie and her team of harp therapist professionals and interns have offered over 113,000 patients a one-on-one harp therapy session, played over 30,000 hours at the 11 hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania that have hosted their programs, and taught over 900 adults how to play the harp for their own healing, empowerment, and enjoyment. Sorry, my cat's jumping all over the place. Edie holds a Master of Arts degree from Thomas Edison University and is a certified harp therapist, also certified in mindfulness studies, laughter yoga, and Himalayan singing bowls. Now I'd like to pass things over to Edie to get us started.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you to the Arts Institute of Middlesex County for inviting me back. I'd like to start out by just giving us a little time out, which I think we all might be able to use to start with. So I'm going to actually offer you a healing harp session where I would invite you to take some cleansing deep breaths, breathing in and breathing out, and just letting the music cradle you. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Saraswati. You may be able to see that she's playing an instrument. She's a Hindu goddess of music, of art, and speech. And she's part of a group of goddesses that are said in tradition to help regenerate and maintain the universe. I thought it was very fitting for me to bring her into the discussion today for a couple of reasons. One is her function in the tradition, because we could use some regeneration, healing, and maintenance, I think, of our universe. So it's a good thing to bring her to this gathering. And two is, you may notice that she is playing an instrument, and the instrument has only one string. So the harp that I just played for you is a harp with 23 strings. But it doesn't matter how many strings we have when we play. What matters is our intention, and that we work the strings that we have to play with intention, love, and healing. So let me give you a little background on me and the harp generally. I was first introduced to the concert harp in high school back in the 60s. And back then, that's the only kind of harp that we had in this country. If you played the harp, it was the concert grand. And if you played the harp, you were part of a very small group of people for a number of reasons. One is that you couldn't get to play the harp unless you had a background in piano. And usually it was like 6 years of piano before you could play the harp. And you also would be prohibited from playing the concert harp, which again was the only one available, because of the cost of a concert harp, which still is more expensive than some cars. The concert harp that I eventually bought in the 90s cost $33,000. So that's really prohibitive and made it impossible for a lot of people to play the harp. So many people come to Bedside Harp in these almost 20 years that we've been doing this work and tell me, I've always wanted to play the harp. The harp has always drawn me, but I wound up having to take piano lessons or violin lessons or whatever. And I will tell you, it's never too late. It's never too late to do something that you really have a passion to do in your heart. So I started harp lessons in high school, went on and played in college. And I grew up and went to school in Philadelphia, which was one of the two rich centers for concert harp. And so I got to study with some pretty amazing teachers. But 2.5 years into my college studies, I ran out of money, which was very easy to do because not only did I not have my own harp, I was renting it, which actually cost more than the rent on my one-room efficiency apartment. But you have to buy harp strings for the concert harp. And those are not cheap either. So I was working and going to school and practicing 6-7 hours a day, and it got to be just too much. And after 2.5 years, I stopped playing the harp and didn't play again for 28 years. What brought me back to the harp was that 3 very dear people in my life died within 8 months of each other. And one of them left me enough money to buy a concert harp, which again, I hadn't touched in 28 years. I didn't listen to the harp in 28 years. It was too painful to listen to or even to see. When I go to an orchestra concert, I would look in a different direction. But then I realized that we are blessed to have this life, and that if we don't do something when we really want to do it, we never get to do it. So I took the whole inheritance and went out to Chicago and bought a concert grand harp, not having played for all those years. And it was clearly my destiny to do that. Studied with the first harpist of the Philadelphia Orchestra for 6 years, and thought I was realizing a dream that I had put away long, long ago. And I was. But there was also something else happening in the process. And I didn't realize that until I saw a Dateline NBC segment that was talking about the healing properties of the harp. Well, I knew the healing properties. I was grieving for 3 people in my life who had passed away, and the harp really did help heal that. Not that you're ever completely healed, but it certainly eased the way for me. But I didn't realize that it really was a healing instrument above other instruments. So let me first give you some background on the harp, some history of the harp. And you'll see that actually the harp is the perfect instrument for healing yourself. And once you feel ready, if you wish to heal others. So we think that the harp was conceived of long, long ago by the bow. If you can imagine the bow, and if somebody plucked the string of the bow and thought, what if we were to make a hollow box underneath, would we get a bigger sound? And they did, and there was a bigger sound. And what if we were to put not one string, but a number of strings? And we think that's probably how the harp was first conceived of. So through the years, people played the harp. Of course, nothing was written down, so we don't have that music of the earliest times. But we know in the Bible that the harp is mentioned. It's the only instrument that's mentioned in the context of healing. When David played his harp for Saul, for King Saul, when he would get into his terrible states of depression. And later when David became king, playing it for himself, for his own healing. So what is it about a harp that makes it so healing? Let me bring my harp up again and talk about that aspect. So the first thing is that we hug it. We hold it in a hug when we play it. And it comes across our chest so that the vibrations that result from every string that we pluck go directly into our body. And you know, we're made of 2/3 water, at least. And so what happens when a vibration hits the water? You have an internal massage. So when a harpist or harper is playing the harp, the first person to be healed is the musician. And it's true that we all need healing. Another feature of the instrument is that we pluck each string with our bare finger. Now, that's not the same as, say, the piano, where when you touch a key, that releases the damper, and the hammer then hits the strings. Here, we're individually plucking each of the strings. And there's something about that touch that just that's very, very healing. Many people who play the harp, when they go away on vacation or they have a time where they're not playing, the thing that they miss the most is that actually plucking the instrument. It's also an instrument of healing for others, for the vibrations that come out of it from the strings that are freely vibrating. And so when something vibrates, when you hear something in some sound, what's happening is that the air molecules are actually displaced, and you can actually feel the vibrations coming out of the instrument. Sometimes it's not a conscious event, but it is very conscious for people who are deaf. I've played for people who are deaf, and they can't hear the music, but they feel the vibrations, and they are healed by the vibrations. Healing is not curing, by the way. Healing is achieving a sense of wholeness, which is very, very valuable in the whole process of healing the body and mind. So, so these are some of the healing qualities of the instrument, not to mention the fact that it is associated with angels. And so very often when we play in healthcare, we are called angels, that we are told that, you know, this healed me like nothing else healed me. So it becomes a kind of a spiritual instrument, as well as obviously being an instrument that is played. I never played a small harp until I started doing work at the bedside. Why? Because I only knew the concert harp, which has 47 strings. And the idea of playing a harp with fewer strings was just not even part of my way of thinking. How can I possibly play fewer than 47 strings? So I found, though, that I can play fewer than 47 strings. It's not the number of strings that matter. It's how I play and what I do with the strings that I have. So I have some instruments that I've brought. They're all harps, various size harps. And I'll play a little of them, a little bit on each of them so that you can hear the sound. Every one of them has their own voice, their own sound. And I must tell you that no harpist or harper has only one harp. Why? We have different harps for different situations. So this harp, the one I played for you a few minutes ago, is really my working harp. It's ideal for me because it weighs only 5 pounds. My concert harp, by the way, weighs 90 pounds. And of course, I don't wear it. When I play in healthcare, I play primarily in hospitals and other places as well. But in hospitals, I play in the emergency room, in the ICU, and in all patient areas. And you know that sometimes you have to get out of the way really quickly. And I can do that when I wear my harp with a strap, which is what I'm doing with this harp. So this harp has 23 strings, and it has levers. It has levers on every string, and a lever raises the pitch by half a step. So when I'm playing in healthcare, I don't usually use levers very much because my focus is on the person I'm playing for. I'm wanting to see what their response is because, you know, music is very powerful and the harp is very powerful as well. And I do play a lot of familiar tunes, and every tune has a memory attached to it. And sometimes the memories are good and sometimes they're not so good. So I need to pay attention to the response that I'm getting from the person I'm playing for. So this is my go-to harp. This is the harp that I carry with me everywhere practically. But there are other harps that I have that I play for in other situations. This harp is more like a lyre. It's more like the harp that King David played. And it's got 10 strings. 10 strings, not 23, but 10 strings. And you can make music on it. And it has an opening in the back as all the harps do to let out the sound. And so if I hold it close to my body, again, I feel the vibrations before anybody does. So every one of my harps has a story attached, at least one story attached to it. And this one is no different. So some years ago, a very dear friend of mine, a sister, a nun, suffered a massive stroke. And she was completely paralyzed on the right side of her body. She had been a pianist and a piano teacher all of her life. That was what she did, was she taught children how to play the piano. But with the whole right side paralyzed, she was unable now to play her instrument. So I brought her this little harp, this lyre. And I said to her, Sister Jane, why don't you try playing this little instrument? She put it on the side that she was paralyzed and was able to use her other hand to be able to play it. And she had great fun playing around with it. And I gifted her this harp. About 2 weeks later, someone from the facility that she was living at that point called me and said, thank you so much for bringing Sister Jane that little instrument. And I said, oh, it was my delight to be able to do that. She said, I want you to know what you gave her was not the instrument so much as you gave her purpose. She is getting people to wheel her around from room to room in the facility that she lives in and she's playing for all the other nuns who are ill and incapacitated. She's playing at their bedside, and this has given her purpose. And I think we all know how important purpose is in our lives. We really need to do something that makes us feel like there's a reason why we're here. So that little harp of 10 strings, actually not only delighted Sister Jane, but gave peace and healing to those that she lived with. I have another harp here. This one has 15 strings. And again, different sound, different voice. So this little harp was actually, the model was made for a student of mine who had polio as a child. And then polio is an insidious disease. It usually cripples you when you are young, and then it can actually go into remission. And so she lived a lot of years in remission and thought she didn't have to worry about polio anymore. And boom, when she hit middle age, it came back fiercely. She wasn't going to let that stop her, though. She had a wonderful wheelchair that she was able to take everywhere, a scooter that she took everywhere. And one of the places she took it was at Bucks County Community College, where I was teaching instructional harp. And she announced to me, I want to play a harp. But she had very weak upper body strength, so she couldn't really hold a 23-string harp. So I went to my harp maker at the time and I said, can you make me a harp that is lighter than the 23 strings that we play? And he made this beautiful little harp. You can see the wood is just gorgeous. And it's very lightweight. I think it weighs probably about 2.5 pounds. And this made it possible for Sonia to play the harp. So she took lessons for, I don't know, a couple of semesters. She was very talented and played around for herself. It gave her great delight. And, you know, I didn't see her for a long, long time. And one day I was in a long-term care facility playing, as I did for the residents there. And who should wheel herself up but Sonia? She wheeled herself up and we both recognized each other immediately. Of course, I wasn't difficult to recognize because I'm always the one with the harp, but she recognized me immediately. And she said to me, I want you to know that when I moved here, I got rid of everything, all of my possessions through the years. She had been an artist as well. Got rid of it all. But I brought my harp with me. So I felt very, very delighted that it was still giving her the healing and the comforting that she needed. I have another harp here that has 17 strings. And you think, wow, you know, what's 15, 17? Is that a difference? Well, it is, because it has a different range. And this one has a bigger sound box. This is being the sound box, this being the neck of the harp. And these being the pins that hold the strings. And I needed to road test it, so to speak. I needed to see if this little harp would work as we stroll through the hospital halls, because I was used to playing a 23-string instrument. So I road tested it. I took it to Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in Hamilton, which is our first ever hospital that we partnered with 20 years ago, and played. And I found that more people approached me, came up to me, than even before with the 23 strings. Why? Because it didn't come out as far as the earlier one did. And it seemed like I was more approachable. So I played it and was sure that it would work. And as I was about to leave that day, a man came up to me. He was kind of a bit disheveled, older person. And he said to me, "Can you play Danny Boy?" And I hadn't really tried it on this harp. So I thought, ooh, I'll try. So he said, "You play it and I'll sing." And so I played it. Oddly enough, this harp, the first string of the harp is actually the first note of Danny Boy. So it was all meant to be. I felt that there was a God wink in there somehow. And when he sang it, I want you to know that his voice was probably the most gorgeous tenor voice that I've ever heard live. And we drew a crowd in the hospital of about 4 or 5 people deep because of his exquisite voice. Turned out that he had been trained at Juilliard. And he first learned to sing. He was in Father Flanagan's school. And that's where he first learned to sing, and then went on to Juilliard. So these small harps, I have the most extraordinary experiences with. And again, it really doesn't matter how many strings you have. It's what happens when you play these beautiful strings. So the last harp I wanted to mention to you today has the most strings. It has 46 strings, but they're not strung like this. They're strung like this, 23 on each side. It's called a double strung harp. Let me bring it over to you so that you can see it. So there are strings on this side, and there are strings on this side. And you can do all kinds of fancy things if you wanted to. I don't do so many fancy things on it. But what is cool is that you really have to kind of cross your eyes to play it so that you get the right string on each side. Very cool harp. I sometimes play this in life care communities because I do a lot of sing-alongs and name that tune. And often I'm sitting with 2 rows of strings. It's heavier. This harp probably weighs closer to like 8 pounds, 7 or 8 pounds, maybe even 9. So I'm not wanting to walk around with it so much, but I do like to sit and play it. And I have it on a stand, but I still can use it as a, on a strap. So in Ireland, Ireland's coins, Ireland's stamp, that is the harp. Everything is connected with the harp. And in Ireland, in the early days, and even up into the 19th century, there were most of the harpers, they called themselves harpers as opposed to harpists, were blind, actually. And that's because they would teach children who were, were not able to see. They would teach them how to play the harp from the time they were young, because it was the one profession that they knew that they would be able to wander the countryside and be able to earn a living, because they could feel the strings and they could play the music from the strings. So I'm really excited that as of 2 months ago, I finally found an organization that is actually translating my 500-page text, which I use for our teaching and for certification, harp therapy certification, into Braille, which I feel is kind of bringing it full cycle, making it possible for people who are unable to see and to be able to read the printed version that I've used for 10 years in Braille. And it's going to be 10 volumes. And I'm really excited. I was just sent the first 2 volumes and it's being worked on now. So I'd like to open it up now. I've been doing a lot of talking, a little bit of playing, and answer some of your questions.
Could you explain the difference between a harper and a harpist? I know you're kind of using them both there.
Well, traditionally, folk people who were considered themselves folk harpers, playing folk music, playing by ear, improvising, that was what they called themselves, were harpers. And traditionally, classical harpists called themselves harpists. But now the terms are interchangeable. So it's not, it's not like you have to be a classical harpist to call yourself a harpist. This is very physical work. You're not only moving around and playing, stopping at each door and maybe even entering the room and playing. So usually it's it's a minimum of 2 hours. Sometimes it's longer, but frankly, you're playing the whole time. So it's pretty exhausting. 2 hours is probably the most that you could do in any, when people first start our certification program, they're happy to be able to do 20 minutes because they are thinking of so many things. They are thinking of, am I doing this right? Am I playing the right tune? Am I playing well enough? And it's all about them. But in our certification program, we really work to get people over themselves and recognize that it's not about you, it's about the music. And it's what the music, the interaction between you and the music, as opposed to you being the therapist. You're not a therapist, you are working the harp, and that is doing the therapy.
Right.
Which is the difference between us, harp therapists, and music therapists. Music therapists go for 5 years of training, of college training, and get a degree in music therapy. And they actually work with their patients or clients to achieve a particular outcome, to achieve a particular goal. Our goal is to create a cradle of sound. And whatever happens with that is just fine. We're not really wanting the patient to do anything. And they receive the music. And even if they don't want the music, that's fine, because they can't say no to a lot of things when they're in the hospital, but they can say no to us. And we feel that that gives them a feeling of empowerment. At least we can say no to the harpist.
Right. Second to that question, so in those 2 hours, how many patients would you see on average?
Good question. So, when I have a new intern, I have them shadow me, because I want them to be able to observe. When you're first going out and playing the harp for patients, you're not really observing as much as and catching as much as you can, as if you're just watching someone else do it. So there are times when I go out and I go into a unit, and it's a big unit. I go around the unit, by the way, at least 2-3 times, very slowly walking. Very often patients think that the music is coming from overhead, from the from the PA system. And, they're kind of shocked to see a real person wandering the halls with a harp. So sometimes I don't get them the first time around, maybe not even the second time around, but by the third time, I'm pretty much in a lot of rooms. I won't say every room, but a lot of rooms. And we get such wonderful feedback from patients. Those are the ones that really spur us on. So there was this one time that I took a new intern out, and she was shadowing me, and we went to a unit where we couldn't get into any room. Played in the hallway, went all the way from the top of the hallway down to the bottom and back and forth again. We just couldn't, it was just too busy. There was too much going on. And still, though, I feel we're still creating this cradle of sound. We're still giving people the experience and the permission, maybe reminder, to take a breath. And by the way, the people who need to take breaths at least as much as the patients is the staff. And they usually appreciate us even more than the patients do. But anyway, we were in this hallway, and I was walking up and down and playing, couldn't get into a room. And we got to the elevator. I had to leave. I had another appointment, and we just didn't get into a room. So we were at the elevator, and when the elevator doors open, a patient was wheeled out on a gurney. And as the doors opened, he was so tight and his face was so clenched, and he saw us and he heard the music, and he broke out into this beautiful smile that just made my heart leap. And I followed the gurney. I walked down the hall with playing. When I got back to the elevator and walked into the elevator with my intern, she said to me, "Oh, I'm so disappointed." And I said, "Why are you disappointed?" She, "Well, we didn't get into one room today." And I said, "Well, you don't have to go into a room to make somebody's day." And that's the point, is that we were on that floor. I feel very strongly that we were on that floor for that gentleman to have that moment of peace and comfort. So it's not always that we have to get into how many rooms. It's how many hearts do we touch? How many spirits do we touch? And sometimes we can't even count that. I mean, anytime we do have a one-on-one encounter, it's usually about 3 to 5 minutes, because 3 to 5 minutes in a hospital setting is a long time, because you have doctors coming and going and nurses coming in and visitors and so forth. But it's not just them that we're playing for. We're playing for everyone within earshot of this. And it could be, and it has been, we get this feedback from patients that have been in the hospital for years later. And they'll say, "I was in the hospital 2 years ago and you played for me." It may not have been me. It may have been one of my students, but she said, "You played for me, and that really made such a difference." And I know that's our fervent prayer, is that we make a difference in healthcare.
Yeah, I can imagine it being a remarkable memory to carry around. If you're waking up from anesthesia and you're being rolled back to your room, or, for whatever reasons you're there to have this experience, which is very unique. I've never encountered anything like that when I've been in the hospital for different reasons and things like that. Definitely something remarkable.
Well, and then we play for patients who are in pain, and we will play to them. We will entrain, in other words, we will match their moan or their groan or whatever, and then we will move out of that, and we see that they have gone past their pain. They've gotten into the music, and that's a delight for us.
In the harps, there's light-colored wood. What is that light-colored wood?
In the harp itself?
Yes.
Well, if you're talking about the sound,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
This is birch. It has a birch. This has a birch soundboard, and the sound box is made of butternut walnut. So it gives a very resonating, very mellow sound.
It has to be used with each harp.
No, it's just the harps that we have are birch soundboards. There are some that we did experiment with that had a spruce overlay, and we found that didn't do it. It was expensive, and it didn't do that much to enhance the sound. So we went back to the birch.
So every harp is made out of birch?
No, these harps are.
Oh, these harps,
Yeah,
I understand.
I do have other harps that are made of walnut, and there are others that are made of cherry. So there's a variety of woods that are used.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your question. Oh, yes. And we have to be careful, because we really have to go to the manufacturer of the harp maker, to see what might be, what won't give a trace of the disinfectant on the wood. So yes, we disinfect our harps and our harp strings. And, you know, the wood is a porous instrument. So right now during COVID, we're not in hospitals. Clearly, you know, because of the pandemic, things have changed. But we do play remote sessions and virtual sessions and recorded sessions. We are partnered actually with a hospital in Washington, D.C., Children's National Hospital, and we are preparing some recordings for them, for the kids that are in the hospital, that are going to be aired on their in-house station. So that will be something that they will hopefully enjoy, and we will have fun making. We have, you know, I didn't really play through my repertoire today. I wanted to give you a sense of playing unfamiliar music, which is what I did on all of the most of the harps. But our repertoires are very extensive. So we play every genre of music, including classical, hymns, Broadway, pop. We tailor what we play to the people that we play for. So if I walk into a room where someone is in their maybe their 60s or 70s, I'll play music from that era. Likewise, when I'm playing for children, I'm going to play Disney tunes. I'm going to play, you know, music that kids would really be able to relate to. And I'll play classical pieces. There are some patients who request, can you play something from, you know, a particular era or a particular show? And we try to do that.
Well, thank you, Edie. I just put Edie's website into the chat box as well. There are some more questions rolling in, but you know, we do have to end around 3 today just to be respectful of everyone's time. So I would encourage you to go to Edie's website, and I'm sure, you know, people can probably contact you that way.
Yeah, Edie at bedsideharp.com. You can drop me a note. Love to hear from you. And it's been my pleasure and privilege to be a participant in your series. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edie. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And yes, please touch base with Edie with all your questions on the harp. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day.
Bye. This is birch. It has a birch. This has a birch soundboard, and the sound box is made of butternut walnut. So it gives a very resonating, very mellow sound.
It has to be used with each harp.
No, it's just the harps that we have are birch soundboards. There are some that we did experiment with that had a spruce overlay, and we found that didn't do it. It was expensive, and it didn't do that much to enhance the sound. So we went back to the birch.
So every heart is made out of birch.
No, these harps are.
Oh, these
Um,
harps, I
yeah.
understand.
I do have other harps that are made of walnut, and there are others that are made of cherry. So there's a variety of woods that are used.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your question.